Hey, my name's Chris.
And my name's Karen, and we want to welcome you to church here today from our hometown in Hereford in the UK. We are joining together as one church across Asia, Africa, America, and here in Europe.
So, from our home to yours,
Let's do church!
Hey, welcome to church everyone! It's so amazing to have you here with us, especially if you are here for the first time.
Yes, my name is Deb, this is my husband Caleb, and we are part of Freedom Church here in South Africa.
And if you are new to Freedom, check out everything that's happening online, especially our YouTube channel. You don't want to miss anything.
One of the things that we've loved in this season was being able to connect with some of our young people and students.
Yeah, it's been amazing to see some of the different things coming out from Zeal and the tribe, and we thought that you would like to see some of it, so check it out.
Hello Zeal, how are you today? My name is Matt and this is next episode of the Zeal crew.
Welcome Zeal! You can check us out on social media at ZealHFD. On Tuesdays at 8 a.m. we have Fitness with Jacob Richard.
His challenge to us this week was to do as many push-ups as we could.
He wanted us all to hang off something.
A squat challenge.
Wednesdays at 7 p.m. we have Insta Live with special guests.
We got to have Kels Johnson, who is the pastor of Amplify Church.
On Thursdays we then get to hear from our very own Zeal team. On Friday we get to come right back here at 7 p.m. with Zeal Crew Online.
Invite 2 of your friends, maybe send a link to them, because nowadays it is so much easier to invite our friends to church.
I can't wait what God wants to do through us in this city and in this generation. And we can't stay silent.
Come on guys,
Come on.
That's so amazing. If you've not connected yet, head over to our YouTube channel and our social media to get more information and get connected.
Yeah, and something else that is incredible is hearing life-changing stories from around our locations.
So now we're going to head over to our UK location in Cheltenham and hear what God is doing there.
Hey Freedom Church fam, it's so great to be with you today and share just a little bit of what's been happening in Cheltenham here in the UK.
I'm Andy and this is Emily, and you probably may recognise us from those fitness videos.
But don't worry, we're not going to be doing any lunges or squats here for you today, so you're safe.
Now in this lockdown season, God has been at work, and we wanted to share a couple of those stories, and one of those is about a lady called Amy.
So Amy's a really good friend of ours. She came to our first Alpha here in Cheltenham, which was amazing, and we got the privilege of being able to walk through the salvation prayer with her and basically her asking Jesus into her heart. This all happened on a Saturday over pancakes, and we got to basically just do life with her, and it's been amazing.
We've noticed that God does not want to be put in a box, especially in this season, and so we've been taking those moments and those opportunities to see him move all across our campus, but especially in that moment. Now another story is from Charlotte.
So Charlotte's one of my favourite fives, and she's Archie's, our second child's nursery school teacher, and she's an incredible woman that we've got, again, the privilege of being able to do life with her. And she came part of our church over the lockdown period, and which is amazing. She's had an amazing testimony anyway. She would regard herself as a Christian, but never asked Jesus into her heart. And so during this Alpha time, we've walked through what Jesus looks like to her, what God looks like to her, what forgiveness looks like to her. And she got saved, which is amazing during this time too. And some of her testimony goes back even to autumn, where I was contending, and a number of us were, about her. She had a condition where she basically lost her sight overnight, and which was pretty traumatic to most people, but she's such a joyful filled person. She was like, no, this is not going to pull me down, this is not going to pull me back, but I'm going to push forward. And so she now has pretty much 99% of her sight back, which is amazing. So such an answer to prayer, such healing. And now she's got saved and she's on fire for God. She's been bold and courageous through so many things and so many circumstances. It's just been amazing.
And we're starting to now meet back in the physical, and some of those people that we've connected with online we're beginning to see in the physical, starting to have them around our dining table outside, where we get to do sisterhood groups started this week. We're starting brotherhood groups in sixes, where we're just able to connect, talk about Jesus, talk about what's been happening in our lives, and start to build that physical community again, which is brilliant, isn't it?
And so we're really excited of what God's moving and doing in this season. A freshness is happening, like the extraordinary is happening, and we're just really seeing how God is being pulled out of the box, like Andy's mentioned, and just doing a new thing in this new season.
And we've seen so much growth over the last few weeks, the last few months, and so we're super excited going forward into September and the autumn about all that God is still yet to do in this town.
We love our church, we love you guys, and thank you so much for listening.
Andy and Anne, we love you so much and your whole Cheltenham family.
Yes, and if you're new to Freedom Church, you might not know, but we're actually meeting all over the world in our different locations, and we love being this global movement.
Yeah, and today we have amazing privilege of hearing from Luke Hencorn, that for the last few years was building church in Chennai with his wife Sophie.
So we thought you might want to get to know him a bit more. Go check this out.
Hey, so Luke, you are going to bring the message for us a little bit later. Thought it'd be good for people in our church to get to know you a little bit. So I've got a couple of quick fire questions. All right, so here we go. Favorite food?
Butter chicken.
Butter chicken.
The Punjabis make it the best. It's no-brainer when you go to India. I didn't have to say it without thinking. It is incredible.
Come on, butter chicken. Favorite place in the world?
India. Of course.
Come on. Favorite artist, music artist?
I like Stormzy at the moment.
Oh, come on, nice. What's your worst habit?
Picking my nose.
Picking your nose?
I didn't have to think about that either.
Oh, that's disgusting. What's your most embarrassing moment in life to date?
I can't believe you asked me that, Dave. Doing this interview.
Doing this interview. No way. Okay, so Luke, you are married to and lead alongside the awesome Sophie.
She's amazing.
She is amazing. And you guys have just had your first baby, the epic Roman. How is dad life treating you?
Dad life isn't just treating me, it hit me. To be quite honest. But no, it's been incredible. So he was born 25th of May. And first-time parent. So for anyone who's been a first-time parent, you know that it is this whirlwind of wow, it's just amazing and beautiful, and yet you have no sleep, and so you kind of walk around like a zombie for the first few weeks. But he's incredible, and we love him so much, and yeah, he's changed our lives. We love it.
Come on. And so you guys right now as a family are living in Hereford because you're a Hereford boy, born and bred.
Yes.
But for the last 6 or 7 years, you've been living all over the world, building church, planting church. And, you know, for the last 4.5, 5 years, you were in India, you and Soph leading, pioneering our church first in Chennai, and then obviously planting out into Bangalore. Tell us a little bit about that experience and what you know, some of the epic stuff you saw God do, some of the, you know, incredible stuff that he did in you.
The simple fact that we have a church based out of Hereford in India in the first place, I think is quite remarkable, isn't it? And I think sometimes we forget just the profound things that God has done amongst our church. And I think witnessing that firsthand is always such a privilege, because seeing where we had come from and now seeing what God is doing is just humbling. And we're literally living the dreams and living the prayers that we prayed, you know, many years ago. I mean, church is the business of people, isn't it? So I think always the most profound things are what you witness in the lives of people. So whether it be, you know, people coming through our doors who've just been through a divorce, and then you see them going on this journey of healing, and now they're, you know, planting and building church in other places around the world, or people who come in with a bit of a party lifestyle, their life gets transformed, and now they're pastors in one of our locations. You know, marriage is restored, relevant Christianity being realized to, you know, countless numbers of people. I think all of the things that we thought God would do when we went to India in the first instance, not only did he do, but he far extended and made it far more personable, far more powerful, far more real. And we really have made family over there, not just church acquaintances, and I think that's been really, really amazing.
Come on, man. Did you ever think as like an 18-year-old growing up in Hereford that you'd live first in Cambodia, in Siem Reap, then over in Belgium, then spend 4 or 5 years? Absolutely wild, isn't it? It just goes to show what your life can look like when you let God lead it, isn't it?
That's right. Literally.
What would you say to any young people in our church right now? I don't know, 15, 16, 17, 18, and they're, I don't know, just exploring faith and, you know, thinking about what they might do with their lives. What would you say to them?
I think just take a moment, and whether you're part of Freedom Church or you're an onlooker of Freedom Church, if you have any contact of even watching what you're watching right now, don't underestimate the power and the influence of what you could be a part of. I just think Freedom Church and what we're doing around the world is far greater than just church attendance. It sets your life ablaze. It opens doors that you never thought you could even open yourself. And you know, I think what I would say to anyone watching this is, don't underestimate what you could be a part of and what God could do through your life if you just say yes. Get involved.
Come on, man. I love it. And in a little while, you're going to be bringing today's message. Can't wait for it. And last question for you. What's God put on your heart in this season for our church?
Wherever you're watching this message, in whatever country or continent, though we're in different geographical places, in many respects we've been forced into a very, very similar situation. And obviously with that can provide its own pressures and different of circumstances. But I also think that this season has kind of opened up some things in our own lives about how we deal with the seasons of our lives, how we respond to them, and how we navigate challenges and different things within our life. And I think my main heart through this message is for us to have a look at some of our predominant dispositions, our prominent defaults in our own characteristics of how I might deal with a situation or season in my life, and let God challenge it by seeing how Jesus responded to them. And for us to really look at, you know, something that would be perhaps more difficult or unusual, or something that I wouldn't categorize as myself. If I actually start responding in that way, it could actually begin to unlock things far greater than I could ever imagine.
Come on, man. Cannot wait for this message. So church, our band are going to lead us now. We've got 2 songs. Turn it up. Get your hearts ready to hear this. Engage with what God's doing. Every week we are seeing him move in homes and places all around the world. We believe he's going to do the same right now. So turn it up, get involved, and get ready to respond to this message.
When the valley's the only way, there's a light that will never fade. I know you will be leading me out. So faith, keep me fighting, and love, keep me running, running the beautiful race, running the beautiful race, running the beautiful race, running the beautiful race. Governments and galaxies, I know you have control. So take the faith inside of me, Lord, I pray it will grow. The love of God is evergreen, it does not melt as the snow. So when it's hard, I'll still believe through the battle we'll go. When to fight is the only way, there's a name that will never fail. Jesus, you will be leading me out, yeah. So faith, keep me fighting, and love, keep me running, running the beautiful race, running the beautiful race, running the beautiful race, running the beautiful race. to heaven's door. I wanna keep running up 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 to heaven's door. Help me keep running up to heaven's door. Help me keep running up to heaven's door. Help me keep running up to heaven's door, yeah. So, faith, keep me fighting. And love, keep me running. Running the beautiful race. Running the beautiful race. Running the beautiful race. Running the beautiful race, yeah. Cause your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I'm surrendered now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I'm surrendered now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Cause all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. 'Cause all my life you have been faithful. In all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. Oh, I will sing of the goodness of God.
You know, I really believe that this message is going to speak to you and bless you. But the reality is that last time I shared with you guys, a lot has happened since. Oh my goodness. I mean, my wife and I, we were building church in India for the last 4.5 years. And we've come back and we're now in the UK now. But even more than that, we became first-time parents. Oh my goodness. Having a baby for the first time is absolutely life-changing. So on the 25th of May, my amazing wife gave birth to our baby boy Roman. I have a picture of him. He's an amazing, the cutest little boy ever, and he's completely changed our lives. But the reality is of this lockdown season is definitely changed perhaps how you'd have a baby kind of in a regular way, right? I mean, you can't see people. All of our interaction is either via phone, FaceTime, Zoom call, all that kind of stuff. And I don't know about you, but it definitely gets me thinking, what's it going to be like when we actually get to meet person to person? Because I don't know about you, I've got a little bit of social anxiety because I'm like, how the heck do I speak to people? It's like when I go up to them, it's like, What do I do with my hands? Do I high five them? Do I tap them on the back? All that kind of stuff. Give them a hug, high five, namaste, whatever it is. It's going to be a little bit weird kind of seeing people. And the funny thing is that's kind of what I want to speak about with you today, all about how we actually respond to the situations that come our way. You know, for every single one of us, COVID has changed the face of how we live life. And I believe that today God wants to speak into how we respond to the different seasons that we have going on within our life. You know, one of the things that I want to talk about is that actually our response to life will either release us or restrict us. When you think about it, when you respond to anything, whether it's via text or via person, we can have a good response or a bad response, can't we? Have you ever messaged someone and you're using emojis and you're putting the laughing face emoji and it's like laugh, 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 and then you accidentally put a prayer hand, so it's like ha 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 ha. Or maybe when someone is kind of asking you to pray for them. We have this a lot as a pastor, as kind of a serious prayer request, and you put prayer hands emoji, and you put the prayer hands, and then you accidentally put like the laughing face, and then the prayer hands with it, so it's kind of like praying for you, ha ha ha, praying for you, and it's kind of awkward, and you accidentally do it. You know, our response to things can either be good or bad. They can either restrict us or they can release us. I mean, think about it. If your wife came out and said, "What do you think of my hair?" and you're like, our response could be a little bit awkward, you know? Or let's say our boss says, "Can you do this for me?" And you say, "No," that's not going to go down too well. Or if someone says to you, "Hey, how are you?" and you say, "I love you too," that's kind of a strange kind of response that you'd give, right? And I know that those are funny examples, but our response really matters. And I believe that actually Jesus wants to speak in today about how we not only respond to people, but how we respond to the different seasons that happen within our life. So what I actually want to look at today is I want to look at with you 3 moments in the life of Jesus. I believe that Jesus is the greatest person that ever walked the planet. And when we glean anything from his life, he makes us better. And so rather than just looking at one story or one aspect, I want us to look at 3 unique moments and kind of take a zoom out picture to see what Jesus might be saying to us today. So we're going to read 3 different scriptures together. And the first one is found in Matthew chapter 8, verse 24 to 25. And it says this: "Suddenly a furious storm came upon the lake, so that the waves swept over the boat, but Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went and woke him, saying, 'Lord, save us, we're going to drown.'" So that's the first part. The second part I want to read to you is in verse 26. It says, "He replied, 'You of little faith, why are you so afraid?' Then he got up and rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm." And then finally, we're going to skip a few chapters later into Matthew chapter 14. And it says, "When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. 'It's a ghost,' they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, 'Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid.'" You see, looking at and using these 3 passages today, honestly, I feel like they describe my life and where I've kind of been at recently. You know, God called my wife and I out back from India into the UK, and it's been an amazing thing. We know that God's in it, but it's also had its challenges. You know, when you take big steps in life like that, it throws up so many different questions of how do I thrive in a season of obscurity? Or, you know, if I've really been living the last 4.5 years, this fast-paced, mission-led kind of life, how do I live now that I'm in a quarantine season? You know, at one point our life was completely immersed with people, and then now we haven't seen people in months. How do you navigate the tension of life and how and when seasons change? Even the culture shock of moving from the east to the west and having a baby now during a global pandemic, pretty crazy, right? And thinking about, you know, how are we going to provide? How are we going to see finance coming in so that we can support what we're doing? And as all of these things go on, you know, my life may be different to yours, but the reality is for every single one of us, our life has been changed during this COVID season. And I promise you, even outside of lockdown, there are going to be seasons that come that either make us feel stagnant, make us feel like we're out of control, may feel obscure. And our main job is to say, how do I make sure that actually I'm strong and that I'm growing within that season? You see, what I've realized is that even if the season changes, I actually need to adjust accordingly to the way that I operate and the way that I respond. You know, how we respond in life is so important. And when I look at these 3 scriptures that we just looked at, what they teach me is that it is possible to thrive in any season that life throws at us. So let's take a bit of a track back a little bit and let's look at those scriptures, because if you look at them as a whole, what you'll realize is that in many respects, the scenario is the same, but the response is different. The common thread is that you have Jesus, water, and a boat. And yet, whilst the scenario is fairly similar, Jesus' response to those are adjusted and different according to what is applicable at the time. You see, what I see here is that Jesus is saying, I'm not just a copy and paste kind of guy. I'm not the kind of guy where you just put money in the slot machine and you get out the answer that you want. You know, Jesus isn't the kind of person where you ring up a corporation and you have to press 1 for this, press 2 for this. Jesus isn't an auto response kind of person. And I think that that's really important here, because what Jesus is doing is he's showing us diversity. Because in his diversity in response, he's showing us his divinity and his humanity. I think it's incredible that Jesus is saying here, I want you to look deeper into how I respond into these situations, because I actually have something for every single one of us that we can learn from. You know, if we're not careful, every single one of us, we can become creatures of habit, can't we? You know, we go to this restaurant and we have this meal. Or I make sure that I drive this route home after work. I go to this place for my date night and I always have this haircut. And if we're not careful, our creatures of habit and our habits, they can actually hinder us rather than help us. And I think that if we're not careful, that actually can rub off onto our relationship with God as well. I mean, when I think about it, so often we say things like, this is the way I pray. This is how much I'm willing to give. This is how I'm used to serving, or this is how I want to live my life. This is how I understand my relationship with God to be like. And if we're not careful, our habits can actually end up hindering us rather than helping us. And so if we have this kind of mindset, but then we read the Bible and we see that Jesus comes in and he never does the same miracle twice. Or he's out on the boat and you expect him to react one way, and then all of a sudden he's speaking to the storm and he's telling it to be quiet. Then you look another place and he's walking on the water and you're thinking, Jesus, how the heck do you do that? And then you expect him to do one thing and then he's chilling with his friends, just hanging out or sleeping in the middle of a storm. You see, when I look at Jesus' life, there's something that I realize. And that's, depending on the season that I'm in, different responses are required. Let me say that again. Depending on the season that I'm in, different responses are required. You see, I think that this is profound, because I think there is a truth that God wants to unpack here. So what's the first response that we see in the first scripture that we read together? The first one for me, simple. It's called sleeping through. If we go back to the book of Matthew, in verse 24, it says, suddenly a furious storm came upon the lake, so that the waves swept over the boat, but Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went and woke him, saying, Lord, save us, we're going to drown. So the first thing that Jesus does, his first initial disposition, is to sleep and to trust. I don't know about you, but I think that's really profound, that Jesus' first disposition is to sleep, rest, and trust. It feels to me that when I look at this story, the disciples were more occupied by the unlikely event that could happen rather than the rock of ages that was in the boat with them. And that's what seasons will want to do to you. They'll want you to be more focused on the problem than the person that is with you. It kind of wants to fade out all reason and for us to focus in on the worrying and the circumstance that is around us. You know, we do this all the time. I mean, it's like, what's going to happen to my family member? Or, you know, am I ever going to get that job? Am I ever going to be able to provide in this way? Am I ever going to be able to pay for this or have that relationship that I want? And what we end up doing is we end up dwelling on something when we should be sleeping through something. We should actually be giving that circumstance over to Jesus. You know, it wasn't that Jesus was having his beauty sleep, or like me, he had a newborn and he needed some rest. No. What Jesus was doing was he was showing us what giving over control looks like. He was showing us that what it looks like to give God the reins of our life. He's saying, hey, this is what it looks like to say, Jesus, take my uncertainty, take my lack, take my pain, take my situation. And by doing this, by sleeping, what he was doing was he was showing the other disciples that God is bigger than any storm that you may face. You know, I believe that there are people listening to this right now, and you're like me and you're like the disciples. You're going through something right now, and it is really easy to worry and be overwhelmed by the circumstance in your life. But I believe that Jesus is saying to you today that one of the most profound things that you can do is sit. You see, in Psalms it says that he makes me lie down in green pastures. And I believe that's exactly what God wants to do with you today. Perhaps this is the season that you're in. Maybe this isn't a season about striving, doing in your own efforts, but maybe God is saying, I want you to rest and give your situation over to me. You see, Jesus slept when there was anxiety around him, and yet he made a decision for that to be his response. So maybe that is what your response needs to be today. The second response that I see Jesus doing is in the next verse, in verse 26. He says, you of little faith, why are you so afraid? Then he got up and he rebuked the wind and the waves, and it was completely calm. You see, the first response is sleeping through. The second response is speaking over. You know, when I look at this, Jesus is saying, you of little faith, why are you so afraid? And for me, it's like, Jesus, this is a bit obvious. I feel like I'm going to die. Why did Jesus say, you of little faith, why are you so afraid? Do you know why I think it was? It's because it was the first thing that came out of their mouth. The first thing that they proclaimed was a word of negativity, doubt, and fear. You see, what they didn't say was, Jesus, I pray that you stop the storm right now. They didn't say, Jesus, I believe that you can bring the sun out. They didn't say, Jesus, I believe that better days are ahead of us. No, the first thing that they said is, I believe we're going to drown. And I think that's really profound, because the first thing that came out of their mouth was a word of doubt. And I want to ask you today, what has the rhetoric of this lockdown season been for you? Has it been words of negativity, words of doubt, words of unbelief? And Jesus is saying, no, I want you to change what you are speaking over, and I want you to change the words that you're using over this season within your life. What are the words that come out of your mouth? Because I think that for most of us, we find it easier to speak about the storm rather than speak to the storm. It's far easier to be overwhelmed and tell everybody else about what we're going through rather than bringing it to God himself. You know, it's like, I think it's impossible that I'm going to be able to find a job in this climate. Or do you know what? I'm always going to be like this. I feel like I'm never going to overcome. And what we're doing is we're amplifying what the storm looks like rather than the one who's able to control it. And I believe today God is saying, do you know what? Maybe you're going through reoccurring trials or reoccurring situations. And maybe it's because we're far more likely to be speaking about it rather than speaking to it. You see, what I love about Jesus is he defied what the experts said, what the opinions of others might be, what the trends might say, and he bypassed all of those things, not out of wishful thinking, but it was in direct defiance to what he was currently experiencing. You see, I believe that there are things in our life that we call normal that God calls unnecessary. What are the things in your life that you perceive as normal that God is saying is unnecessary? I think that there's too many things that we've put up with for far too long, and we think that's just the way it is, that's just how it is, it's where I'm from, it's my background, it's where I live, it's what I've been through. And God is saying, you've called normal what I call unnecessary. And what speaking over is about is saying, no, my God is bigger than what I'm going through right now. I really believe that God is saying, hey, if there's hardship in your life, what are you speaking over it? Is there lack in your life? What are you speaking over it? As my wife and I come out of India, it's like, our best days really ahead of us, Jesus? He's saying, what are you speaking over the season that is and the season that is to come? You see, what we so easily forget is that this storm was not God's heart or intent. Actually, the moment he spoke against it, it removed, showing you and I that God never intended for us to dwell within the storm, to put up with the storm, but actually to speak against it and see a new thing come to pass. You see, Jesus spoke when there were trials and when there were troubles. And I want to ask you, is this a response that you need to adopt today? Finally, number 3, you have sleeping through, speaking over, and finally walking out. If we go on to Matthew chapter 14, it says the boat was already a considerable distance from the land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. It's a ghost, they said. They cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid. You see, I believe that there are seasons when we need to let go and let God. There are other seasons that I believe that we need to speak out a better future and that the best is yet to come. But I also believe that there are other seasons where we need to take life by the horns and we need to stand on it and start saying, I'm going to be defiant and walk against whatever is coming up against my life right now. You see, there is a defiance that we can so often miss about what Jesus is doing here. You see, what I love in this verse, it's in verse 24, it says, the wind was against it. Now picture this. Jesus Christ, the Son of Man, walking in direct opposition and resistance to the wind that was against him, just so that he can walk to you. How powerful that Jesus would be in direct opposition to the thing that was against him, and rather than allowing it, he walked over it and on top of it. You see, I think for many Christians, we struggle with that because for us, when the wind starts blowing, we think that's a confirmation that we need to close that door. And yet Jesus walked against the very thing that was against him. He walked on top of it. You know, I think that there are some people here and God has spoken over you that you're going to have a great marriage. But the reality is that it's not in a great place right now. Or maybe God's spoken over you that you're going to be great at business and do great things, but you haven't really gotten around to putting that into practice. Maybe God's spoken plans and purposes over your life, but there haven't been many steps taken forward. You see, there are seasons when we have to sleep on it. There are seasons when we have to speak over it. And let me tell you, there are some seasons when you have to do something about it. And I think that this walking on the water is one of the most difficult that Christians face, or maybe one of the most difficult ones for you to be listening to. Because it's far easier to pray about something, isn't it? It's far easier to give over something to God and say, God, you can have this, you can bring my miracle. But Jesus was walking to the miracle. It was actually with every step that he took, the miracle for his life became realized and eventualized with every step that he took. So I want to ask you, what are the plans and purposes that God has placed over your life that he's actually calling you to go after and do something about? What are the storms that he's not just called you to allow, but he's called you to walk on over? You know, God is saying, I want you to do something about the plans that I've done for your life. Maybe for you, that looks like taking a step forward despite opposition. Maybe for you, it's putting into practice the things that God has spoken. Maybe it's getting some discipline and actually doing something that you said that you would do, or pursuing somebody, or pursuing a way to serve, or a way to give of yourself within the church. You see, all of these different responses are incredibly profound. You have sleeping through, speaking over, and walking out. And I want you to think, which of these responses resonate to you the most? Because Jesus didn't have to do any of these things. It's not as if he had a fear of water. It's not as if he was learning to swim.
It's not as if he had some issues that he was bringing the disciples in. No. Jesus was the Son of God. He was God himself. And the reason he displayed these things was to show you and I how we should deal with storms within our lives. So that means we need to take a close look and say, how does this apply to me? Because when you realize that these responses are for you, you begin to realize that these are the keys to unlock your life. When I think about it, these methods of diversity of response that Jesus showed us, I think, was in reflection to the people that were around him. Think about it. Jesus was with fishermen. They were used to understanding God with their hands. And so this walking out response made sense to them. I mean, look at Peter. He walked out with him because that's how he understood walking out faith. But then there were others of people around Jesus. They were doctors and tax collectors, people who understood faith with their minds and their intellect. And so this idea of speaking out faith, even when you can't see it, that's unfathomable. They couldn't get their hands around it. There were other people there who were family men, they were brothers, they were relational people, they were people who'd rather play it safe. And so when God was saying, hey, no, I want you to walk on water, I want you to respond to me in this way, it would have challenged the very fiber of who they are. Now, if you remember at the start of this message, I was talking about our dispositions and our responses that can either release us or restrict us. And I think that actually the hardest response out of those three that we've spoken today, the hardest, most challenging one, I believe, is actually the one that's going to unlock the most fruit for your life. Because if you're a doer and you love to strive and you love to make things happen in this COVID season and you feel like things aren't happening fast enough, then you're going to love to walk on water, but you're going to find it a little bit more difficult to let that over to God and let him do the work for your life. You know, there are other people, you love speaking about it, you love talking about it, you love telling everybody about your life, but bringing it to Jesus is that little bit more challenging. Whatever it is for you, I believe that actually the most challenging response is the very thing that's going to unlock your life the most. I want to say this, that adjusting your posture has the ability to set a miracle in motion. When you adjust your posture, adjust your disposition to what you're used to doing, and actually saying, God, I'm not used to speaking out in faith, or I'm not used to trusting you with this aspect of my life. I'm not used to getting a fight and being tenacious with the plans you have for me. In those things, I believe you're going to see the biggest fruit. So, as we close today, I want you to consider, what are those responses that speak to you the most? And as we close, I want to read this scripture to you. It's in Colossians chapter 3, in the Passion Translation. It says, Christ's resurrection is your resurrection too. This is why we are to yearn for all that is above, for that's where Christ sits enthroned at the place of all power, honor, and authority. Look what it says now. Yes, feast on all the treasures of the heavenly realm and fill your thoughts with heavenly realities and not with the distractions of the natural realm. You see, if you look at these stories and you're thinking, how is it that Jesus did what he did? How was it that he responded in that way? I believe that Jesus was more aware of heavenly realities rather than the natural realm. You see, when he saw the natural realm of the storm around him, he understood that actually there was a greater heavenly reality that was available to him. And I want to give you some hope, and I want to give you some faith today that whatever you're going through right now, that is purely the natural realm that we exist in right now. But there is a far greater heavenly reality that when you give that over to God, or when you stand upon it, or where you speak over it and say, no, God, I believe that there is greater, you bring heaven down into your situation where you are right now. So I want to pray for you, wherever you are. I pray that whatever response is for you, that you be challenged to flourish and grow within this season. I pray over your life that wherever you're at, that God would illuminate and highlight to you, whether it be sleeping through, walking upon, or speaking over. That God would challenge you today and say, I have so much more for you. Come out and walk on deeper waters and grow like never before. In the name of Jesus.
Like the frost on a rose, winter comes for us all. Oh, how nature acquaints us with the nature of patience. Like a seed in the snow, I've been buried to grow. For your promise is loyal, from seed to sequoia. And I know, though the winter is long, even richer the harvest it brings. Though my waiting prolongs, even greater your promise for me. Like a seed, I believe that my season will come.
Lord, I think of your love like the low winter sun. As I gaze, I am blinded in the light of your brightness. Like a fire to the snow, I'm renewed by your melt the ice of this wild soul till the barren is beautiful. And I know,
Though the winter is long, even richer the harvest it brings. Though my waiting prolongs, even greater your promise for me. Like a seed, I believe that my season will come. I can see the promise, I can see the future. You're the God of seasons, and I'm just in the winter. If all I know of harvest is that it's worth my patience, then if you're not done working, God, I'm not done waiting. You can see my promise even in the winter, 'cause you're the God of greatness, even in a manger. For all I know of seasons is that you take your time. Could have saved us in a second, instead you sent your child. Though the winter is long, even richer the harvest it brings. Though my waiting prolongs, even greater your promise for me. Like a seed, I believe that my season will come.
Every one of us is in a season right now, and I really love what Luke shared about how we can respond.
Yeah, and if you've never taken that step to become a Christian, but you would like to, we want to pray for you and help you to take this next step.
You can get involved in the live chat, or you can send us an email right now.
Yeah, it was so amazing to have you here with us this morning. I'm so excited to see how this message is going to impact our world.
So join again next week, and don't forget to bring those you're connected to.
Come on.
See you next Sunday.
See you.